Okay, so think about this for a second. It's the darkest time in the 20th century, totalitarianism is just consuming Europe, and one philosopher, exiled on the complete other side of the planet, decides he has to fight back. His weapon? It's not a gun, it's a book. A massive takedown of the very ideas he believed had pushed civilization to the absolute brink. Today, we're diving into Karl Popper's masterpiece, The Open Society and Its Enemy.
And you gotta understand, this was not just another dry academic book. For Karl Popper, writing this was his war effort. He was basically stranded in New Zealand, totally cut off from the war tearing the world apart, and he poured every ounce of his energy into figuring out the philosophical sickness behind it all, the root of both Nazism and Stalinism. This book was his answer.
So, to really feel the power of this book, you have to start with the story of how it was made. Because really, this was a philosopher going to war.
I mean, just look at this timeline. It's a total pressure cooker. Popper literally started writing the day he found out that his home country, Austria, had been invaded. He then spends the entire war in almost complete isolation, handwriting this beast of a book. And after all that, it gets rejected over and over again before someone finally agrees to publish it. This wasn't just some casual idea. It was an obsession born out of a global crisis.
And this part is absolutely crucial. Popper wasn't just arguing against Hitler or Stalin, the men. He was going after the intellectual ground they stood on. He saw this common, dangerous thread, a philosophy that gave these movements their terrifying power and made them feel inevitable. Which brings us to the main villain of Popper's book. He even gave it a name, historicism. It's this way of thinking that says if you just understand the past, you can unlock the secrets of the future. Okay, so historicism sounds a little academic, right? But the idea itself is pretty straightforward. It's the belief that history isn't just one thing after another. No, it's a story with a script, and it's heading toward a specific predetermined ending. And the historicists, they believe they've cracked the code. They think they've found the laws that are driving that script, whether it's God's will or the laws of economics. They don't just predict things, they claim to know our destiny. And this is where it gets so dangerous. A scientific prediction, like for an eclipse, is concrete. It's testable. If you're wrong, your theory is wrong, simple as that. But a historical prophecy? It's vague. You can't prove it wrong. It just claims to know the ultimate destination. And if you think you know where history is supposed to end up, well, you can justify pretty much anything in the present to make sure it gets there.
So this is the question Popper really wants us to wrestle with. If you believe history is just playing out some grand cosmic plan, it kind of lets you off the hook. It gets rid of what he called the strain of your responsibilities. I mean, why bother fighting for a better world today if the future is already set in stone? It's a way of thinking that can make people either totally passive or totally fanatical.
So, where in the world did this dangerous idea of historicism even come from? Well, this is where Popper does something incredibly gutsy. He traces it all the way back to some of the most famous and respected names in the history of philosophy. This quote just sets the stage perfectly. Popper is basically saying, hey, we have to stop just automatically respecting these famous thinkers of the past. We have to be willing to challenge them, because as brilliant as they were, their ideas can have truly devastating consequences. He's about to put some philosophical giants on trial.
And here they are, his prime suspects. He starts with Plato, arguing that Plato's whole idea of a perfect, unchanging society was a fearful reaction to the messy democracy of Athens. For Plato, any change was basically a step backward. Then there's Hegel, who Popper blasts for creating this mystical philosophy where the state is basically God on earth. And finally Marx, who he says took Hegel's method and just swapped out the idea of a chosen race for a chosen class that was destined to win in the end.
So, despite all their differences, Popper says they all made the same fundamental mistake. Every single one of them claimed they had found the secret script for history, the ultimate law that dictates human destiny. And by doing that, they all lay the intellectual groundwork for what Popper calls the closed society. A society where the group is everything and the individual, well, the individual doesn't matter much at all.
But Popper doesn't just tear down old ideas. That's the thing. The second half of this massive book is all about building something new. So if these grand prophecies are the problem, then what's the solution? How are we supposed to actually make the world a better place?
He basically lays out a choice between two ways of living. On one side, you have the closed society. It's tribal, it's rigid, it hates criticism, it runs on dogma. The open society, which is his ideal, is the complete opposite. It values the individual person, it's flexible, and this is key, it actually gets stronger through rational criticism and reform. It's a society that knows how to learn from its own mistakes.
So that's the big question, right? How do you build this better world? The answer is not what you'd expect. You don't do it with some giant, perfect, all-encompassing plan. In fact, Popper says that's the most dangerous thing you could possibly do. The real path forward is way more humble and way more practical. And this comparison is everything. You've got utopian engineering, that's the historicist dream. Let's just wipe the whole slate clean, bulldoze the city, and rebuild society from scratch based on my one perfect plan. The risk is astronomical, because if you're wrong, people die. What Popper pushes for is piecemeal engineering. Don't try to build heaven on earth, just focus on getting rid of specific, real-world problems: poverty, illiteracy, injustice. It's like repairing your house room by room instead of demolishing the whole thing. And this is how it actually works. It's pretty much just the scientific method, but for society. You find a real problem, you come up with a limited solution to try and fix it, you test it out, and you watch carefully to see what happens. Then you learn from your mistakes and you adjust your plan. It's a slow, careful process of improvement, not a violent all-or-nothing revolution.
Now, it's really easy to look at all this and just file it away as a historical document, right? A response to what was happening in the 1940s. But Popper's arguments are completely timeless. In fact, they might be more urgent right now than they've ever been.
And this might be the most important takeaway from the whole thing. The open society is not a paradise we finally arrive at. There is no end of history. It's a fragile, messy, ongoing process. It requires us to be constantly vigilant, to stick to reason, and to have the courage to criticize even our most deeply held beliefs. The fight against the temptation of the closed society, with all its easy answers, never, ever ends. And all of that hard work, the criticism, the debate, the constant adjustments, it all boils down to one singular, massive advantage. An open society, because of its commitment to this piecemeal reform, is the only system ever devised that allows us to get rid of bad governments and bad policies without having to resort to violence. It's the only system that allows for peaceful change.
And that leaves us with Popper's ultimate message. The future isn't written in a book somewhere. There is no destiny except the one we make for ourselves. It's only when we give up the arrogance of pretending we know the future that we can actually gain the power to shape it. It's a call for humility, for reason, and for the endless, difficult, but absolutely vital work of building a more open and humane world.